morning, good morning, good morning. And thank you so much for joining me for the podcast of the True Power from Within. I do pray each and every day that this podcast touches you in the most amazing and encouraging way. So, I have decided to start doing Bible studies on all the women in the Bible. And I decided to start with Esther. Now, if you don't know the story of Esther, you can read the book of Esther, but long story short, she is a Jewish girl, and the king had decided, because the current queen was not obeying and um, being being submissive to the king. She was being rebellious. He decided that he wanted to replace her. So Esther was actually adopted by a man by the name of Mordecai, and he told Esther that he wanted her to go for the queen position, right? Well, she was a Jewish girl, and there was war all around um, the in that country on Jewish people. So Mordecai said, "Don't tell anybody that you're a Jewish girl, just go." Well, because of her beauty, the king instantly fell for her, and she was placed as the queen. So, sometimes in our lives, God will elevate us to a level, right? But how many times have you tried to go into a position or fit into a crowd or do something without people knowing who you really are, right? We pretend to be somebody else. We pretend to have these certain goals and ambitions, and we pretend to be the person that we really aren't, right? And we hide that true, authentic person or culture or whatever it is, right? Maybe, I remember I used to have the mindset, okay, maybe I can go get a job and I just don't have to tell them that I'm a convicted felon or that I was an addict, and they'll give me the job and they'll never know, right? But then they find out because they do a background check or whatever the case may be, right? It's because God didn't intend us to hide our true, authentic selves, our genuine selves. He didn't intend for us to hide the miracles that He has done in our lives, right? Because the reason we go through the things that we go through and He elevates us to other levels is so that we can share hope and joy and peace and healing with other people around us. But today, I want to talk about something that I feel like is such a profound thing, but yet sometimes we miss it, right? So I'm coming out of the book of Esther, chapter 4, starting at verse 13. It says, Mordecai told the messenger to reply to Esther, "Don't think that you will escape the fate of all the Jews because you are in the king's palace. If you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will come to the Jewish people from another place, but you and your father's family will be destroyed. Who knows? Perhaps you have come to your royal position for such a time as this." Esther sent this reply to Mordecai, "Go and assemble all the Jews who can be found and fast for me. Don't eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my female servants will also fast in the same way. After that, I will go to the king, even if it is against the law. If I perish, I perish." So Mordecai went and did everything that Esther had commanded him to do. So here's the thing. There was a deceitful man that did not like the Jews. And Mordecai was the kind of guy that he really didn't care, right? He was not going to obey what they said. He was not going to do anything that they had commanded him to do, right? So he was rebelling. And this man wanted him dead, right? But not only did they want him dead, they wanted to kill all of the Jews, right? So because Esther was a Jew, but she didn't ever tell anybody that she was a Jew, right? So Mordecai would stand outside the gates, right? He's trying to get her attention. And Esther, there was messages sent back and forth between Esther and Mordecai, right? And he's telling her, he's like, you have to do something. You have to go to the king. You have to, we need you to help us right now, because if not, we are going to die, right? So Mordecai, they were going back and forth. And, what is very profound, it says, who knows, perhaps you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. Have you ever been elevated in your life, right? And you're like, you get imposter syndrome and you feel like, hey, I'm not good enough for this. This is not like, what is happening here, right? Like, I'm not qualified for this. Don't have any experience in this, but God elevated you to a level, right? Or sometimes maybe you've worked and you've prayed and you've said, God, can you give me this business? Can you let me make $100,000 a year? Can you heal my children? Can you, heal my marriage? Can you do all of these things? And you're praying to God and he blesses you with those things, right? So you think that you've arrived because he's blessed you in those areas. But what we don't realize is that much that is given is also much that is required, right? Even though you may feel like you've arrived, you think that you've got the blessings that you want, you think you're living in the king's palace, right? You've been promoted from poverty to the queen, right? And you think you've arrived, you're comfortable, your life has changed, you get comfortable in this new lifestyle. But then comes the test. Then comes the time that you're going to have to stand up. Here comes the time that you're going to have to fight even harder than you've ever fought before for, to keep your position. Or maybe it comes a time that you have to fight, right? And reveal who you really are. And that's what Esther was going through at this moment, right? She was going through where she had got the position, as the queen. She was comfortable. She had all her servants. She was doing her thing, right? All these fancy clothes and jewelries and all of this stuff. And she was just living the life, right? But now comes a time when the test comes. The test, right? Because she, God had probably put her in a position, just like Mordecai said, for such a time as this. Maybe you're in a position and you feel like, okay, God's blessed me with all of these things, but why is it so hard now? Why is it like everything is fighting against me? Why do I feel like Satan's devices are just all around me? And that's because even though God elevates you, that doesn't mean that you've arrived, right? He'll give you grace in your space, but sometimes we wear out our grace in that particular space, and God's got to shake us up, right? Because we get into a position, oh, I'm making $100,000 a year. Oh, my kids they're all grown and they're all out of the house, and oh, they're doing okay. And, or, oh, I'm on this job and I've got this management position now, I'm good, right? But God doesn't always intend for us to stay in that particular area. He doesn't mean for us to get into this place and get comfortable, right? Because God is about growth. He's about continually planting a seed for a continual harvest, right? If you were a farmer and you planted a seed one season and you harvested it, right, later in the year, but you didn't plant another harvest, how are you going to feed? How are you going to make money? God gives us grace in a space that he has blessed us to be in, right? But then when we get into that space, more is required from us. More prayer, more fasting, more faith, more belief, more work, more helping, more tithing. We are being required to do more, right? God doesn't bless us to make $100,000 a year and then all we do is go out and blow it. No, he intends us to be good stewards over our finances, to help others, to help grow his kingdom, right? To help grow our businesses, to help our children, or to help people that we don't even know. God puts us in a position and gives us grace in our space, but we have to do the work that is at hand. And Esther was very unsure of herself at first, right? Because if you read the whole thing, she was like, I don't know about this. Like, I could die. Like, this could be my life because nobody knows that I'm a Jew. Nobody. And I'm living this really awesome life. Like, I don't want for nothing anymore. Like, I went from poverty to the castle, and I don't want for nothing. And she could have chose to forget about her people, right? She could have chose to say, I'm not, I am not, because my life is way too good right now, and I am not going to ruin that. But Mordecai reminded her, as maybe she was chosen for such a time as this. Maybe the things that you're going through right now, you've been chosen for such a time as this. Maybe those miracles that God's been doing in your life, and now you feel, okay, I got the miracle, I got the job, I got the business, I got the $100,000 a year, I got the car, I got the house. Why am I feeling like God is fighting me so hard? Why do I feel like Satan is fighting me so hard? It's because you're not meant to stay in that space. God didn't intend for you to arrive and stay there. Sometimes God's going to give us grace, but sometimes we'll wear out our welcome in that space, because God has intended us to go farther. He's intended us to touch more people. He's intended us to grow more businesses. He's intended for us to build his kingdom. So when you get into a space, you can't get comfortable, right? We cannot get comfortable in a space, because God did not intend for us to arrive. He intended for us to continue to become, right? You will never arrive at a destination and stay there when it is God ordained, because God continues for us to move and to become every single day. It's not about arriving at a place. So as we see Esther, she had to go into a moment, a days and days of prayer and fasting, right? But because of her dedication, and because of her being chosen, just like you, for such a time as this, she went into prayer. She went into fasting. Not only was she fasting and praying, but she had others around her fasting and praying as well. And then she went in before the king, and there was favor on her. In fact, all of her people survived. And the man that was the evil guy that was intending to kill not only Mordecai, but all of the Jews, he was the one that was killed, because there was favor on her. There was favor on Esther. She may have came from poverty. Maybe you came from poverty. She may have came from being in bondage and in chains and in prison, or an addict, or whatever it is. Just like you, just like me. But there was favor shown on her. She had favor, right? That favor came because she stood up for what she knew that she was chosen to do at that point in time. She was chosen for such a time as this, just like you are chosen for such a time as this. God has worked miracles in your life, and you feel like sometimes things are fighting against you so hard. But Satan is really busy when you're close to that breakthrough. Satan is really busy when you're close to that blessing. Satan is really busy when you really get into prayer and meditation with God every single day, and you're praying and you're fasting and you're believing and you're doing all of the things, because you are constantly in a state of becoming a bigger kingdom builder. You're becoming because you're building a greater business for the greater good. You're becoming because you're trying everything that you can to get the promotion, right? You're saving money, you're paying off your debts so that you can own the house or you can have the car. You're doing all of these things, right? But you feel like Satan, you're almost there, but you feel like Satan is just attacking and attacking and attacking. And that's because God has chosen you for such a time as this. Much that is given, there's much required. So you've been through the storm, you've been through the addiction, you've been through prison, you've been through the trauma, you've been through all of that, and you've healed, and God has brought you to a place. He's brought you to a place, right? Maybe you had sickness in your body and he healed you. But he's brought you to a place for such a time as this. And it's not to stay in the space that you're in. It's to continue to grow. It's to, as Esther did, she had to take over the hard stuff. Sometimes we want to run away from the hard stuff. But we can do hard things because we have God backing us, because we have prayer, because we have a direct line of communication to our Creator. But as Esther did, we have to do the hard things, even when we feel like I'm not qualified, or I have imposter syndrome, or I'm never going to go any farther than this, or, my qualifications have ran out, or my time has ran out. No. You have been chosen for such a time as this. And it is time for you to get into prayer. It is time for you to get into meditation. It is time for you to grow your faith. It is time for you to get a little bit more belief in you. Because just like Esther, you were chosen. Esther changed the world she lived in through prayer and fasting. Right? She changed the world she lived in because she did hard things. Not because she laid back in her castle and drank wine and partied all day with her servants. No, it's because she stood up and did those hard things. She stood up for what God had placed her in that moment to do. And my encouragement to you today is, what has God chosen you for in this season? Are you open? Are you vulnerable in this season? Or have you said, my life looks a little too good right now. I'm not going to take any more risk. I'm not going to stand up for anybody. I'm not going to do anything that is going to possibly wreck the comfortable season I'm in right now. Because I fought real hard in that last season to get to this season. I went through so much crap in last season to get to this season. I'm comfortable. I'm okay. And God has given you that grace to be in that space. But if we stay too long, we begin to get complacent. We begin to live in that mediocre stage, because eventually all of that newness and that blessing and that thankfulness and that comfortable spot, that's all going to go away. Because God didn't intend you to stay where you were. He doesn't intend for you to stay in poverty. He doesn't intend for you to stay in homelessness. He doesn't intend for you to stay in addiction. He doesn't intend for you to stay in prison. And not just being in an actual prison, but imprisoned in your mind. You were not chosen to stay in this season that you're in forever. You were not intended to just barely get by. You were not intended to arrive at a destination in your life and stay there. You were intended to start to continually become every day who God has called you to be. And the calling may change. The calling may get harder. It may require more prayer, more fasting, more believing, and more faith. But it's because God has chosen you. He's chosen you for such a time as this. But the choice that you have is, are you going to fight in this season, or are you going to step back from what God has called you to do? Are you ready to go to war? Are you ready to fight the Goliath? Are you willing to fight the Goliath? Are you willing to fight for Goliath to get to the dreams and the goals and the miracles that God has promised you in your life? Because I'm going to tell you something. If God can send David in with a slingshot to kill a giant, he can definitely send you in to kill the giant. All of those giants in your life that look impossible, all of the trials and tribulations that you feel like I cannot get through, I just can't win. God said, no, you are the David. You are the Esther. It's time to stand up and fight. It's time to pray and meditate and fast and believe and have faith. Because on the other side of that Goliath is something better than the season that you're in right now. There's something more glorious over there. But you can't get imposter syndrome. You can't shrink back because you're scared. It's when you're going in to kill a giant, it's feeling the fear and doing it anyways. It's taking the risk. It's praying over yourself and over your family and over your business and over your life and over total strangers. It's going out and helping someone, not just driving past them and seeing them and just being like, okay. No, it's about digging your heels in because you believe in what God has promised you in your life. He has chosen you for such a time as this. So even though the mountains look really high right now and the valleys look really low, even though you feel like it's too big of a risk, you feel like you're too comfortable right now, you feel like it's the impossible, or maybe you feel like you don't deserve it, I'm telling you that God has chosen you for such a time as this. And the requirements may be a little bit harder, but the reward is so much greater. So today I encourage you to step into the season that God has you in, because you were chosen for such a time as this. Stop shrinking back. Stop saying I don't deserve it. Stop having imposter syndrome. Stop saying the risk is too big, or I'm not worth it, or I'll never get there. God has chosen you for such a time as this. And it's time for you to stand up and walk in what God is saying that you can have. That fear, that Goliath, the very thing that you're scared of, right on the other side of that is the blessing, the miracle that's going to get you to even farther than where you are right now. So I encourage you today to stand up for your destiny. Stand up for your calling. Walk into your purpose and live intentionally, because God has chosen you for such a time as this. And I thank you so much for hanging out with me this morning. I hope I added value to your life. If go ahead and share this to your social medias, tag some people in the comments. If you're catching the replay, put replay. If you're catching it live, put live. And again, I hope you guys have an absolutely amazing day, and I will see you again really soon. Bye-bye.